Hello my friends and welcome back to another little adventure. Today's little video is going to be my wrap up for the month of August. Overall, it was a great month of reading. I really enjoyed what I've read. It was kind of that weird point between like the end of the summer semester for me and then the start of fall semester. So that kind of little break that I got, I read a ton of books, and then kind of towards the end of the month I listened to more audiobooks as I kind of got back into university life. But overall, I think it was just a great month of reading, and I kind of separated these books into different genres and what they kind of encompassed and what they got going on with them. But I think without further ado, let's hop in with fantasy sci-fi. One of the books I got to was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. There's a lot of nostalgia for this book for me, because this was probably the first sci-fi book that I ever read. It was one of these books that at my local library that was never checked out. I mean, all the kind of popular books like Harry Potter and all that were always checked out, but it was the classics and stuff like that was never really kind of checked out. So that's kind of what I got, and that was really the first book that I ever read. And I think I actually still have that copy because they did like a little library giveaway, and I think I picked it up, and I think it included The War of the Worlds. But there's just a lot of nostalgia behind that for me. It brought back a lot of joy as being like my first kind of sci-fi read, and it was actually like assigned to me for one of my classes, and it was just a blast to kind of go back and kind of think about like the topics that he discussed and kind of get a deeper kind of meaning and lens, kind of a deeper look at it as we kind of are moving into the future and what it would look like. And for the time period that it was wrote, it's very interesting to see how similar things in the book are kind of turning out. But it was just this like great book. I think I still have the book. I do. I still have the book. Like, look at this. This is all like just old, and it had just The War of the Worlds and then The Time Machine, and it's falling apart sadly. But like, look at this. This is like ancient, and it has just been like, there's just a lot of good memories with this. And then a fantasy book that I picked up was Heart of Flames by Nikki Paul Preda, which I gave 4 stars. And this is the second book in the Crown of Feathers kind of series, trilogy, I believe. And I still enjoyed the world and everything that was going on with it. It's just like it felt like it was a lot more, like a lot slower than the first one. It felt like they were kind of, you definitely, like in this one, you expand and you definitely go to different places around Pyra, and there's definitely like some battles throughout, and I still enjoyed kind of exploring more of the world, but for some reason like it just didn't hit me as much as the first book, and that might be due to kind of like middle book syndrome and stuff like that. But it was still enjoyable, and I can't wait to see where it kind of goes off in the final book, especially kind of with just the aspects of kind of like a civil war on the brink, and then having Veronica have to kind of deal with some other things that I can't go into depth with. But if you haven't checked this out, this is basically following Veronica. This is actually following several perspectives, but in the first one you follow like Veronica, Val, Tristan, and then this one added a couple new perspectives into it. But each of them are kind of on different aspects and comes from different walks of life in this Pyra, this kingdom that was once ruled by warrior queens, and then a civil war broke out, and kind of the Phoenix Riders were hunted down and thrown into exile or killed. And then basically there's this rumor of the Phoenix Riders kind of going like on the uprise again and coming back, and Veronica is kind of searching for them, and she finds them, and then from there she is kind of trying to join their ranks as kind of pretending to be a boy because they won't allow kind of girls into her rank. And then from there, it's just a lot of kind of political intrigue, action, and it's just got a lot going on with it. But I love the world and just the kind of religion, or not so much religion, but kind of just the fantasy aspects behind just the phoenixes. Phoenixes have always been kind of one of my favorite mythological creatures. But I can't wait to see where it goes in this final book, and then I don't know how I'll feel about just ending the series. Then I got to a King Arthur retelling, and that was Half Sick of Shadows by Lauren Sebastian, which I ended up giving 3 stars. And I thought it was interesting how it kind of followed Lady Elaine of Shalot's kind of perspective, as she's kind of the seer, and she's kind of like the oracle of the group, where you have like Arthur, Lancelot, Morgana, Guinevere. They all kind of have their different abilities and powers, and I thought that was interesting to learn more about just their background and kind of just their kind of how they grew up in Avalon together, and how they're basically trained by the Lady of the Lake to kind of just go out and just basically serve the one purpose of putting Arthur on the throne. But I thought it was interesting to see how Lady Elaine's perspective kind of came into play as she saw everything kind of unfold as they journeyed throughout the kingdom to kind of accomplish that goal. And like, she is plagued with kind of constant nightmares and different visions about different things that could happen. And I thought the coolest thing about it was just the ability to kind of look at these different pathways that it could go, and kind of not knowing which way this kind of retelling would take. And it kind of left you with a little bit of suspense as to whether it would kind of go this way or this way. And it was just a joy to kind of get a different take. It's been a while since I've read like an Arthurian kind of legend. I read the Knights of the Round Table when I was really young, but other than that, like, I haven't checked out anything. And I thought it was just great to get back into this world and explore some more that I didn't get in Knights of the Round Table. Specifically traveling to kind of Guinevere's kind of hometown, and like learning more about just how they are kind of these vicious beasts and just the things that they can do. I thought that was really cool. And then learning more about Morgana's kind of magic. And that was one thing I didn't like about this story, was that it kind of painted Morgana as just being an evil person, and I didn't think that she really was. Like, I felt like the gang, that's what I call them, is they were kind of taking advantage of her, and she was just trying to do anything for her brother Arthur. And I thought it was just sad to see her kind of painted as just being completely evil. But I did enjoy kind of just this different take, and it was I would say that it was kind of like it was like whatchamacallit, like everyone kind of said there was a feminist take, and I would agree with that a little bit. I didn't get as much as I was kind of expecting, but it was still a great read. And the only thing that it was kind of, the only reason I gave it 3 stars was because it was mainly just the journey and kind of uncovering what they went through. And I was expecting a little bit more of action and suspense, but it was mainly just looking at the different pathways and seeing which way would kind of go. So, I don't know, it was still pretty great though. A middle grade fantasy that I really enjoyed was The Seeds of Rebellion, which is the second book in the Beyonder series by Brandon Mull, which I ended up giving 4.5 stars, and I was worried about this one. With Heart of Flames, that one had middle book syndrome, but I was kind of afraid that this one would have it as well, with kind of them building up a rebellion. I figured it would kind of be a little bit boring, but it wasn't. It was really great. Like, it picked off right off the bat with kind of the things that happened in the first book, and it really is like it continued to build this rebellion up, but it still kind of expanded more on the world, and there was battles and like action and suspense spread out throughout, which really made it great, and it made it a fast read. And like, it's just like this world, I'm fascinated by this world. Like, everything that's kind of going on with it has just been so creative and a different kind of take on what I'm used to with just like a lot of middle grade fantasy. And it was just a joy to kind of experience all the different thoughts that's going through Brandon Mull's kind of mind, and the way that he put forth this world, and like pictured everything kind of interacting, and just the characters, like, they're all funny, and they've got like, I really enjoyed the series, and I never hear it talked about. If you don't know what it's talking about, it's basically following Jason, who kind of arrives at this fantastical world through a portal. So it's a portal fantasy, and then from there he's basically set on a quest to kind of take down this evil wizard that rules the whole kind of kingdom. And to take down the wizard, you have to kind of locate these different syllables located around the world that are basically kind of, once you put them together, you say it in front of him, and then he's just completely gone. And then I can't go any more into depth, but from there, it just takes off with kind of uncovering this. And The one thing that I didn't like in the first book was that it didn't include kind of Rachel as a perspective. I felt like it could have been a ton better if it included her as well. And then in this book, I was hoping that it was, and it did. It included Rachel as a perspective, and I really enjoyed that. And it's like I have one more book to go, and it's going to be interesting to see where it ends, but I can't wait to finish it. A folktale retelling that I picked up was The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed, which I ended up giving 4 stars. This was her debut novel, kind of taking a take on Hungarian and Jewish kind of folktale and just mythology, and I thought it was really interesting. It kind of follows this one girl, Eva K, and Gaspar as they kind of go on this quest to kind of stop his evil brother from kind of plaguing the kingdom with his evil plans. But it was interesting to see how kind of the woodsman, who is Gaspar, they basically come to Eva K's village every so often to demanding like a sacrifice of a wolf girl to take back to the kingdom. And then they're basically still allowed to kind of practice their religion and kind of their pagan gods, but they have to sacrifice someone. And when they come this time, Eva K is the unlikely kind of sacrifice. And they basically are going back to the kingdom, and along the way, in the dark forest, this evil dark forest, it kind of separates them from the rest of the world. There's some monsters going on, a lot of stuff going on in there, and on the way back, they're attacked, and Eva K and Gaspar are the only survivors. And from there, they kind of get a little pact going, and they kind of an alliance to kind of take down his brother, and then they kind of go about the world, exploring it, going to other villages, and like trying to accomplish this. And along the way, they're kind of getting some feelings for each other, like some strong enemies to lovers. Like if you're a fan of that, definitely pick this up. But I just enjoyed, I'm always a fan of kind of folktale retellings and anything in general, and I thought this was interesting. I did a book chat on this where I went further in depth, but I thought that the monsters were great, and just the dark forest aspects were perfect read for fall or winter. The only thing that I didn't like was it didn't spend as much time in the dark forest as I was hoping. It spent a little bit more time in the kind of kingdom, the main capital, and I was really expecting it to kind of go back to the forest, and it did. And then it was just a short kind of little brief thing, and then they went back to the capital. But that was the only thing that I didn't like about it. But other than that, like the concept of the woodsman and kind of demanding a sacrifice, I thought was really cool. Added another level, and just the woodsmen in general are pretty cool. The wolf girls, pretty cool. They wear wolf pelts, and they all have magical abilities. Like that was another thing. Like each kind of religion had different magical abilities and how they kind of harnessed them. So it added kind of different abilities with each kind of religion, and it was just made it so much complex. And I thought the wolf girls' powers were pretty cool. Their pagan religion was really cool. It just like the whole world was cool. Just the only thing that I didn't like was just I wanted more of the dark forest. And the last kind of fantasy book that I picked up was The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This was my book club pick for the month of August, and it was also a buddy read that I did with Hugo over at Scientist Reading Room's channel. And I thought this was really cool. I thought the world was fascinating. This is following several different perspectives. It's Priya, who is kind of like a housemaid, and she is kind of got a darker past, and she travels back to this temple that she used to work at, or live at, actually. She lived at. And then from there, she was kind of thrown out. Not basically thrown out, but she was basically she had to leave for some things that I won't go into depth with. But she kind of goes back as to be a housemaid for Melina, who is the princess who was sent there to kind of be imprisoned by her brother, who has some dark plans for just the whole kingdom in general. And then there's some other perspectives as well that are kind of interact with these two main perspectives, Priya and Melina, and there's just a lot going on. There's like a kind of rebellion working, and then there's Melina trying to escape, and Priya kind of trying to uncover more about the temple, the Harana temple. So it's got a lot going on, and I thought that was interesting. It's got political intrigue, like some magic was really cool. I thought it was like just fascinating how kind of similar to The Wolf and the Woodsman, like the different kingdoms had different magical abilities and beliefs, and based on their beliefs, like they could do certain things. Like Priya, she's able to kind of have a deeper connection with the temple of Harana once she arrives, and then it added more abilities to her. And then her siblings, her temple siblings, they basically are kind of surrounded by this kind of these deathless waters, and basically you enter the deathless waters, and if you return, then you're basically a once born, and then you do it again, and if you return, then you're twice born, and then once you're like a thrice born, I believe it's called, then you're basically like considered a god, or kind of similar to the Yaska, which is their gods. And I thought it was really cool how just the magic played a giant role in this world. There's a lot of political intrigue and movements throughout the story, spread out the story, and I thought it was a good spread of just like some action, political intrigue, and then it was really leading up, and then there was like 200 pages left in the book, and it was just like I didn't know where it was gonna go after this, because like a lot of stuff went down, and then it really started to slow down there at the end to kind of prepare itself for the second book. And that was really the only reason that I gave it, I think, 4 stars or 4.5 stars. And then there at the end, it kind of gave you a little bit to kind of leave you off on a kind of cliffhanger as to where it would go in the second book. But I can't wait to continue on with this series and check out her other series that she has. But this was a great debut, and if you haven't checked it out, go give it a try. Then we had only one kind of literacy and contemporary fiction, and that was Paris Hours by Alex George. This is on like my spring TBR a while ago, and I finally picked it up. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I think I'm going to end up giving this kind of three stars. And like this was, I know I was saying that I was looking for a book to kind of finally make me cry, and this one did. There were several perspectives that really kind of emotionally hit me, but I just didn't like the ending. It was kind of one of those endings where you are kind of left off as to kind of like you basically get to choose what the ending was. But I really wished the author kind of would have kind of expanded a little bit more and kind of like basically kind of finished it off. Like it felt like it was rushed to me, and that's the main reason it was 3 stars. But I really enjoyed kind of the Paris atmosphere and just all the different perspectives. It's following like several different perspectives, like an artist, a puppet maker, an author, a maid, and they're all basically in search of one thing in Paris, and they basically only have one day to kind of find this, or else like consequences are going to happen. Guermine, he is kind of an artist, and he's basically he's got some money that he has to repay to some thugs, and if you don't get it back, if you don't pay it off that day, then he's gone. There's another one, John Paul, who's looking for a kind of another story that he's stuck on where to go in life. He's suffered a lot. That's another thing, like all these perspectives are kind of impacted by the Great War. This is kind of in 1920s Paris, 1930s Paris, and they're just all got a lot of things going on, and really added to their perspective. Soren, I really like felt for him the most, and that's like I can't go into spoilers or anything, but like just the things that he went through in his past. He's an Armenian refugee, and the kind of the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, are basically forced him to flee his home, and it was just sad to kind of hear his perspective. Like all of them, they were sad, but his just really kind of hit me hard, and it was just like, it was sad to kind of see all of them. But I did a reading vlog, I believe, on this and the kind of Jasmine Throne, I think. But yeah, I just really enjoyed kind of being back in Paris and finally getting into it, and I think it was just great. And then we'll get into some nonfiction that I read, and this was probably the first month in a while that I've read quite a few nonfiction books. And the first one that I got to was Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand, and I watched the movie growing up. I've always kind of been fascinated by just the history of World War I, World War II, and I'm a big fan of just track and sports in general. I did a lot of sports in high school. I did track, and just following Louis Zamperini, who was kind of a famous mile runner, and learning his journey as he kind of went to the Berlin Olympics, and then kind of afterwards, and just hearing his life story was really impactful, and just kind of listening to the things that he kind of went through was just really emotional, as kind of and motivating as well, because like he was faced with a ton of things growing up, and then in athletics, and then kind of being a POW in a Japanese war camp, and just like not knowing like if he would wake up the next day. Like that's like it was sad to read it, just like the horror, like things that he went through and just all the POWs went through in general. But it was just great to kind of just hear like, or not, it wasn't so much great to kind of hear the things that he went through, but it kind of was like motivating that like somehow, some way, like he still was able to kind of like come back from what he went through and still like it's hard to go into it without like spoiling it, but he was just like it was just really impactful, I think. And since I was come from a athletics background, it was just great that I got to kind of connect with him in the track. Like, it's just great. And like, I watched the movie, but I never read the book. And like, I was glad that I finally picked up the book. Another one that I listened to was Dead Wake: The Last Crossing of the Lusitania. And I think I ended up giving this like 3 stars. Unbroken, I ended up giving 5 stars because I thought that was outstanding. But Dead Wake, it follows just the different passengers, their kind of takes, and their history behind like why they're going on to England and traveling on the Lusitania, as well as kind of the kind of captain of the U-boat 20, as well as the kind of crewmates of the U-boat, and then kind of room 40. And it's just uncovering the history about kind of what went on both on the ship and the U-boat, and then kind of the information that they got in room 40 on the kind of crossing of Lusitania, which was one of the main reasons that the U.S. kind of entered the war. That and the Zimmerman note. But it was just interesting to kind of learn more about just like what went on and kind of just the tactics of the U-boats. And like I thought it was just interesting to kind of learn more about the different kind of passengers on the like the Lusitania, and then like the kind of the different like life on the U-boat and how kind of compressed and like sunk in you were, and then just like the other things. There was just all that going on, and I've always been fascinated by kind of World War I history, so it was just great to kind of learn more about it. I've always been a fan of Eric Larson, but it was just great. And the only thing I didn't like is just I can't think of anything. It was just like not my favorite of his works. And it was just like, it's sad as well, because at the end, like when the sinking was happening, he provided a lot of primary sources and first account sources to kind of depict what happened. And it was just sad to kind of just see like all these people losing their lives and family members, and then the aftermath of it. But it was still like a great historical read to kind of give me a little bit more knowledge. And the last nonfiction that I got to was Educated by Tara Westover. And like I heard a lot about this, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. And I think this should probably be a kind of a mandatory read, or like a required read for a lot of younger kids to kind of learn more about just how like privileged they are to kind of attend school. Like a lot of people don't have the opportunity to attend school, and it was just sad to kind of see her journey and growing up in kind of like a very Mormon household where they basically believe that the end of days is basically upon them at all times, and there's just a constant worry about whether or not like she was safe, and her father wasn't didn't want her to get an education, wanted her to kind of stay at the house and be like kind of like a mother and just have a big family, but she wanted to kind of go to school. And like it was just inspiring to see how she kind of went from nothing, basically having no prior knowledge in anything, and going to like Cambridge and Harvard and getting her PhD and writing a book. So it's just like I feel like a lot of kids would benefit from just like hearing her story. And like I know when I was a kid growing up, I always kind of thought that school was a drag, and like there's no point in me going to school, like it's worthless. But just like hearing her story has really motivated me to kind of stick to academics and just like get an education, because there's a lot of people around the world that don't have the ability, like the kind of the privilege to attend school. And it's just like, it was just sad to hear her story and her journey, but also motivating. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely go give it a try. And lastly, for graphic novels, I finished Nameless by Grant Morrison. I saw this as a kind of like, I saw this in a review by Steve Talks About Books a while ago, and I found it in my used bookstore, so I thought I'd just pick it up and read it. I thought it was interesting how it's following these kind of astronauts who are kind of coming from different backgrounds. Like the Nameless guy, he's basically in the Oculate and they're all basically trying to stop this asteroid from destroying Earth. And just along the way, like some things are not like it isn't what it seems, and it's just like a kind of like a whole mind trip. The whole thing, very graphic in my opinion. Like I'm a scaredy cat, and I didn't like some of the graphicness. Like I guess I'm not a fan of that, but I thought it was interesting, kind of the mythology that it kind of touched on with Aztec and all that stuff. But overall, like it wasn't too bad. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. But I can't wait to check out more by Grant Morrison. He did kind of like the Batman series, and that's kind of what he's famous for. But I thought this was interesting from him, and that was, yeah, it wasn't too bad. But those are all the books and stuff that I read this month. It was a great month of reading overall. It was really enjoyable. And I think I'm going to switch doing these videos up instead of doing like a large video, because this is going to be a long video. I think I'm going to do kind of a recent reads to kind of give you, that way I can give you a lot more information about the books and my thoughts. That way I don't have to like, kind of like rush through this. And I think with kind of like university and kind of all that kind of stress, I think it'll be a lot easier on me to kind of do recent reads. So I think that's what I'll probably do in the future. But that is all for today's video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I hope you all have a splendid day, but I'm gonna leave you with a message from Ellie, who said that adventure is out there. So I'll catch you next time. Bye.